I was 63 years old the first time I truly understood what it felt like to be disposable, not unwanted, not overlooked. Disposable? Like something you use and then set by the curb on trash day. I remember standing in my kitchen that Tuesday morning, pouring my second cup of coffee, watching the light come through the window over the sink the way it always did in October. That low, amber kind of light that makes even ordinary things look like they matter. I thought about how much I loved that window. I'd picked out the curtains myself. Drove 40 minutes to a fabric store in Clarksville because I wanted that exact shade of cream with the small blue flowers. My husband used to tease me about it, said I'd drive to the moon if I found the right curtains up there. He'd been gone 11 years by then, and I'd kept those curtains, all 11 of them. My daughter and her husband had been living with me for 8 months. That was the arrangement. Temporary, they said, just until they got back on their feet. My son-in-law had lost his job at the distribution center, and my daughter, Vanessa, said they just needed a little time. 6 months, maybe 7. I told them, of course. I told them this is what family does. I want to be honest here, because I think that matters. I wasn't a perfect mother. I worked too much when Vanessa was young. I missed things I shouldn't have missed. But I loved her. I have always loved her the way you love something that came from your own body, from your own blood, in a way that doesn't require explanation or proof. I just didn't know she had stopped loving me back somewhere along the way. Or maybe she never loved me the way I thought she did. I'm still not sure which one is worse. The first sign came in September, about a month before everything fell apart, though I didn't recognize it as a sign at the time. Vanessa started asking me questions, careful questions, the kind you ask when you already know the answer but need to hear it out loud. She asked me if I still had the original deed to the house. She asked me what bank I used. She asked me, very casually, as if it were nothing, whether I'd ever thought about putting the house in her name to avoid probate. She'd read something about it online, she said. Said it would save a lot of headache someday. I told her I'd think about it. I should have stopped right there. I should have said no and meant it and locked my filing cabinet. But she was my daughter. She was standing in my kitchen in her sock feet, holding a mug that said World's Okay's Chef, and she looked like she always looked. Tired, a little distracted, entirely familiar. I didn't see danger. I saw my child. Her husband, Marcus, was quieter about it. He was always quiet around me, polite in the way that keeps a certain distance. He said please and thank you and called me by my first name, Gloria, like I'd asked him to. But sometimes I'd catch him looking at things in my house. The furniture, the walls, the built-in bookshelves my husband had put in himself, with an expression I couldn't quite name. Not admiration. Something more like calculation. I told myself I was imagining it. In early October, Vanessa brought home a stack of papers. Said she'd talked to someone at a legal aid office downtown, and they'd suggested a simple transfer on death deed. It would keep the house out of probate, protect me from estate taxes, make everything simpler for her if something happened to me. She set the papers on the kitchen table like it was nothing, like it was a grocery list. I'm 71 years old now. Looking back, I want to shake the woman I was at 63. I want to grab her by the shoulders and say, read every word. Read every single word before you pick up that pen. But I trusted her. She was my daughter. And I was tired that evening. I'd been on my feet all day at the dentist's office where I worked as a receptionist, and she explained it in a way that made it sound routine. She pointed to the lines. She said sign here and here and here, and I did. I signed my house away. I didn't know it then. The full truth of what I'd done didn't come to me until 6 weeks later. sitting in a rental car in a parking lot outside a Walmart in Meridian, Mississippi, reading a voicemail I just received from my neighbor Connie, with my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I need to tell you about the trip first. Vanessa had suggested it, a long weekend in Nashville, just the two of us. Girl time, she called it. She knew I'd always wanted to go, always talked about the music, the food, the walk along the riverfront. She booked the hotel herself, said it was her treat, that she wanted to do something nice for me. I thought it meant things were getting better between us. I thought maybe she was trying. We drove up on a Thursday. The weather was still warm for October, that kind of soft fall weather that makes you feel like everything is going to be all right. We went to a honky-tonk on Broadway and ate hot chicken and walked around until my feet hurt. Vanessa seemed happy. She took pictures of everything. She laughed at a joke I made, a real laugh, the kind that creases her eyes. I thought, this is good. This is us finding our way back to each other. Friday was good too. We went to the Ryman in the afternoon, stood in the actual auditorium where so many people had made something out of nothing but talent and heart. I cried a little, not because I was sad, just because beauty sometimes hits me that way. Vanessa put her arm around me. I leaned into her. Saturday is when it changed. I woke up and she was already dressed, sitting at the little desk near the window on her phone, typing something. She looked up when I came out of the bathroom and smiled, but it was a different smile than the day before. Thinner. Like it was covering something. We had breakfast at the hotel. She barely ate. She kept looking at her phone under the table, which she knew I hated, and when I said her name to get her attention, she looked up with that same thin smile and said, "Sorry, Mom, just something with the apartment." We didn't have an apartment. I didn't know what that meant and I let it go. Around noon, she said she needed to run a quick errand. Said it wouldn't take long. I could wait at the hotel or walk around, whatever I wanted. I said I'd walk. I wanted to find a bookstore I'd seen the day before. She kissed me on the cheek. I remembered the feeling of it, how normal it seemed, and said she'd be back by 2. She was not back by 2. I waited in the lobby until 3. I texted her 4 times. I called twice and it rang through to voicemail. I told myself there was traffic. I told myself her phone had died. I went up to the room and sat on the edge of the bed and waited some more. At 4:30, I went down to the front desk and asked if there had been any messages. There hadn't. I asked if my daughter had checked out. The woman at the desk looked at her screen and said the room was paid through Sunday. That was all she could tell me. I went back upstairs. I sat in that room for a long time. When I finally opened Vanessa's nightstand drawer, I don't know why I did it, desperation maybe, looking for any clue at all, I found a folded piece of paper. Just a short note, in her handwriting. It said, "I'm sorry, I couldn't do it the other way. The house will take care of everything." I read it 3 times. Then I sat very still and understood that my daughter had left me. I had $62 in my wallet. My phone was at 11%. I had no charger because Vanessa had been using mine and it was in her bag. I had the key to a hotel room that was paid through Sunday. I had the clothes I was wearing and the bag I'd brought and a return bus ticket home from a station I'd never been to in a city that wasn't mine. I want to tell you I was strong right away. I want to tell you I got up, squared my shoulders, and handled it. But that's not true. I sat in that hotel room in Nashville and I cried for probably 2 hours. The ugly kind. The kind that doesn't feel like it's going to stop. Then I washed my face. And I started thinking, my bus ticket was for Sunday morning. I still had that. I had $62, which was enough to eat carefully for 2 days and get a phone charger from the dollar store 3 blocks from the hotel. I'd walked past it the day before. I wrote down Connie's number from memory because Connie had been my neighbor for 14 years, and I'd called her enough times that her number lived in my head without trying. The woman at the dollar store? A young woman named Angie with braids down her back and a name tag that had a little star sticker next to it, helped me find the right charger. When I told her it was the wrong one, she went into the back and found another without me even having to ask again. I thanked her more than the situation probably called for. She said, "Honey, it's okay, you look like you're having a day." I said that was one way to put it. She laughed, and I almost did too. I charged my phone at an outlet near the hotel vending machines and called Connie. She answered on the second ring. I told her what had happened. Not all of it, just that Vanessa had left me in Nashville without a way home and I'd be back Sunday. Connie was quiet for a second, and then she said, "Gloria, I need to tell you something," and the way she said it made my chest go cold. There had been a moving truck, she said. Thursday evening, right after Vanessa and I had left for Nashville. She'd watched from her window. Marcus and two other men loading boxes, furniture, bags. She thought it was strange, but told herself maybe they were moving things to storage, rearranging. By Friday morning, she said, the lights in my house were off and stayed off. I don't remember what I said to Connie after that. I think I told her I would call her when I knew more. I think I said thank you. I hung up and stood next to that vending machine for a long time in that buzzing fluorescent light, and I tried to understand what my life had just become. They had planned this. The whole trip, Nashville, the good weather, the honky-tonk, the arm around my shoulder at the Ryman, it was a way to get me out of the house. While I was buying hot chicken and believing my daughter was trying, Marcus was loading up everything they wanted and walking away. What I didn't know yet was what they'd taken beyond the furniture. I didn't know about the bank account. I didn't know that 3 weeks earlier, Vanessa had used the power of attorney she'd slipped into that stack of papers I signed in October to open a joint account in both our names, transfer my savings into it, and then remove me from it. I didn't know that the transfer on death deed I'd signed wasn't what she'd told me it was. I rode the bus home Sunday morning. 4 hours and 20 minutes. I sat in a window seat and watched Tennessee turn into northern Alabama and then into the edge of Mississippi, and I held my purse in my lap and didn't talk to anyone. An older man across the aisle offered me a piece of hard candy. Butterscotch. I took it. Sometimes the small kindnesses are the ones that keep you vertical. Connie was waiting at the bus station. She drove me home. The house was still locked. They hadn't changed the locks, which was either an oversight or a calculation I still don't understand. Maybe they thought I wouldn't go back. Maybe they thought I would just accept it. I opened the door and stood in the hallway and looked at what they'd left. The walls were bare. The built-in bookshelves were empty. My husband's armchair was gone. The kitchen had pots and pans, but no small appliances. They'd taken the coffee maker, the toaster, the stand mixer I'd had for 20 years. They took the TV, both of them. They took the lamps from the bedroom and the quilt off my bed, a quilt my mother had made. They took it. I sat down on the floor in the living room because there was nowhere else to sit, and Connie sat down next to me, and we stayed like that for a while. After maybe 10 minutes, she said, "Gloria, what do you want to do?" And something in that question, the directness of it, the assumption that I still had a say, that I still had choices, woke something up in me. I felt it shift. Not anger, exactly. Something older and quieter than anger. The part of you that has survived things before and knows it can survive again. I said, I want to know exactly what they took from me. The next morning, I went to my bank. The woman at the branch who helped me, a young woman named Patricia, with pearl earrings and reading glasses she kept pushing up her nose, was very patient with me. She pulled up the account history and walked me through it without making me feel foolish, which I appreciated more than she knew. The joint account Vanessa had opened, the transfers, The dates: $11,400. $11,400 that I had saved over years of working. Holiday bonuses, tax refunds, the careful accumulation of a woman who knew what it was to have nothing and refused to go back there. Patricia told me quietly that I needed to speak to an attorney. She said there were options. She wrote down 2 names on a piece of paper and slid it across the desk. I called the first name that afternoon. His name was James Okafor, and he had an office above a dry cleaner on the main street in town, and he was patient and thorough and told me in plain language what had happened and what I could do about it. The transfer on death deed I'd signed was not what Vanessa had told me it was. It had been modified. James showed me the language, read it to me slowly, to function as an immediate transfer. In plain terms, I had signed my house over to her. Not upon my death. Now. Immediately. The house was legally hers the moment I put my name on that paper. Except, James told me, for one thing. There was a provision in Mississippi property law regarding transfers made under conditions that could be characterized as undue influence or misrepresentation because I had signed without independent counsel, because the document had been misrepresented to me, and because there was a documented pattern, the bank account, the timing, the departure. There was a case. It would not be fast. It would not be easy. But there was a case. James also told me something else. He said Vanessa was not the first. In the 2 years before she came to live with me, she and Marcus had done something similar to Marcus's mother in Hattiesburg. That case hadn't gone anywhere because the woman had been too afraid to pursue it. But the record existed. The paper trail was there. I hired James Okafor. I paid his retainer with the money Connie lent me, interest-free, because that is who Connie is. The next 3 months were the hardest of my life, and I have had some hard stretches. There were days I didn't want to get out of bed. There were nights I lay awake in my stripped-down house and felt so small and so foolish that I couldn't breathe. I thought about all the signs I'd missed, all the questions I should have asked, all the moments I chose trust over caution because she was my daughter and I believed that had to mean something. But I also got up every day. I went to work. I came home to that house with the cream curtains and the built-in shelves, and I kept going. James filed the case in January. The court issued a temporary injunction preventing any sale or further transfer of the property. Marcus had apparently been in contact with a real estate agent. James's investigator found the emails, and they'd been 2 weeks from listing the house. 2 weeks. Vanessa called me once in February. I picked up, which surprised both of us, I think. She started with, "I need you to understand," and I let her talk for a little while. And then I said, "I'm gonna stop you there. I have an attorney. Do not contact me again except through him." And I hung up. I practiced that speech in my bathroom mirror for a week before she called. I'd been preparing for it. I needed it to be clean. No crying, no yelling, no door left open for her to talk me back into something. Just a clean, clear line. In April, the court ruled in my favor. The transfer on death deed was voided. The house was restored to my name. Marcus and Vanessa were ordered to repay the $11,400 plus legal fees. There were also separate fraud charges related to the bank account that resulted in a fine and 18 months of supervised probation. They did not fight it hard. James said that was because they knew what they'd done, and because the paper trail was undeniable, and because Marcus's mother's case in Hattiesburg had surfaced in discovery and made them look exactly as calculated as they were. I didn't feel triumphant the day the ruling came through. I want to be honest about that too. I sat in James's office and read the paperwork and felt something more like exhaustion than victory. A long, deep tiredness. The kind that comes not from the hard thing itself, but from having survived it. James asked me if I wanted to celebrate. I said I wanted to go home. I drove home on a Thursday evening in late April, the trees just beginning to come back after winter. That pale green that looks almost tentative, like the world is testing whether it's safe to try again. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a minute. Then I went inside. I put the kettle on. I stood at my kitchen window, the one with the cream curtains, the blue flowers, and I watched the light come through the way it does in April, warmer than October, lower and longer. The kind of light that makes things look like they matter. Because they do. If you are watching this and something in my story sounds familiar, if someone has asked you to sign something you don't fully understand, if the questions have been getting more careful lately, if something feels off but you keep telling yourself you're imagining it, please hear me when I tell you, you are probably not imagining it. Get an attorney before you sign anything. Get a second opinion. Call your bank and ask them to flag unusual activity. These things can be undone, but it is so much easier to prevent them than to repair them. And if it is already too late for prevention, if you are already sitting in a hotel room or on a bus or on the floor of a house that feels like it has been hollowed out, I need you to know that it is not too late. It is not too late to call someone. It is not too late to fight. I'm 63 years old, and I kept my house, and I still have the curtains my husband teased me about, and I am still here. That counts for something. It counts for a lot. The thing I keep coming back to is the curtains. I drove 40 minutes to pick out those curtains. Cream with small blue flowers. My husband thought it was excessive. Maybe it was. But when you have spent most of your life being careful with money, careful with trust, careful with the small choices that add up to a life, you learn that the details matter. The curtains mattered. The house mattered. And it wasn't just property. It was the physical record of every sacrifice I had made quietly and without complaint for decades. When Vanessa handed me that stack of papers on a Tuesday evening, I was tired. That's the truth I have to sit with. I was tired and I trusted her and I didn't read carefully, and I think about how different everything would have been if I had just slowed down. Just asked one more question. Just said, let me have someone look at this first. One sentence. That's all it would have taken. What happened to me wasn't random. Looking back now, I can see the shape of it clearly. The careful questions in September, the legal aid story, the papers on the kitchen table, the Nashville trip timed to the day. Every step was deliberate, and every step worked because I kept choosing to believe the best about someone who had long since stopped deserving that belief. That's not weakness. It's what love does when it hasn't been given a reason to stop yet. But it's also something I had to learn to balance against clear-eyed judgment. Trust without discernment isn't virtue. It's a door left open. James Okafor told me something in his office above the dry cleaner that I have thought about almost every day since. He said, the law can correct a wrong, but it cannot undo the time it costs you to fight it. He meant it practically, the months, the money, the energy. But I heard something else in it too. He was telling me that wisdom has a price when it comes late. That the version of me who signed those papers without reading them paid a higher price than she ever had to. I don't say that to punish myself. I say it because I think it's important to be honest about the role I played. Not in Vanessa's choices. Those were hers entirely. But in the circumstances that made those choices possible, I could have protected myself better. I know that now. And knowing it is the only way it becomes useful. What got me through was not bitterness. Bitterness would have been easy. What got me through was something more like stubbornness in the direction of my own life. Getting up. Going to work. Calling James, sitting across from Patricia at the bank and listening carefully, even when what she was telling me was hard. taking each next step not because I felt strong, but because I decided that sitting down was not an option. Connie sat on my floor with me. Angie found the right charger without being asked twice. Janes explained the law in plain language and meant it. People will show up for you if you let them. That's something I had forgotten somewhere in the years of handling everything alone. I kept the house. I kept the curtains. And I kept something harder to name. The knowledge that I faced the worst thing a person can face, which is betrayal by someone you made room for in your own heart, and I did not let it make me smaller. That's the only thing I know for certain worth passing on.